It's the Blue Vote Cafe, a little bit of wonkish, a whole lot of fun. I'm David Schellenberg along with Rachel Wickster. We're the co-chairs for Democrats Abroad in Canada's capital city of Ottawa. Hello, Rachel.
Hello, David. How are you?
I am excellent. So how was your weekend?
It was a good weekend. We like our podcasts to be evergreen, but I don't mind mentioning that I went to the October 18 No Tyrants event.
Right.
Yes.
So, in the United States, it's No Kings. Here in Canada, we're not going to have that conversation. That's a different thing.
Well, it's simply explained. There are countries with monarchies where there are American expats and also citizens of those countries who want to participate in the No Kings events, but they don't want to mix messages and accidentally present themselves as being anti-monarchist, even though they might be,
Yep.
But the focus is on the United States and the Trump administration.
Right.
And therefore, in countries like Canada and the UK and Spain and elsewhere, they've been branded No Tyrants events because that is a label that that fits a lot of different people, but specifically in solidarity with the wannabe king in the United States. So,
Indeed. And by all reports around the world, it was a pretty good turnout on that day. How many showed up in Ottawa?
About 1,000, yeah, as happened with the No Tyrants Day event in June as well, which is, I think, you may disagree, but I think it's pretty impressive for Ottawa. We see Ottawa is the capital, as maybe not everybody who's listening knows.
Right.
And it's a big protest town. There are protests all the time in front of Parliament and all weathers, and it's just part of the local landscape. Mm-hmm. So to get 1,000 people out for any event like this is, I think, pretty incredible. Yeah.
Yeah, indeed, and I'll back you. I wasn't at the event, but it's always interesting on these things where, there's a handful of American citizens, dual citizens like us, and then there's just a whole bunch of pure Canadians that just want to be heard and don't really know what to do.
Absolutely. There were a lot of Canadians and also Americans who aren't dual citizens. There was the whole spectrum of citizenship across the two countries. And it was a really lovely afternoon. Lots of inflatables. We had a dinosaur, a unicorn, a shark, a bunny, and a couple of frogs, of course.
Good.
Yep, and they all danced. They danced in the street.
Wonderful. Well, that's oddly that connects us right back around to who we're talking today. Just that kind of art in somehow, some way, even if it's a dancing frog. That's when art and politics mix in the middle, and I'll use that as to say, and who's with us today, Rachel?
Having given away the fact that you know who's with us today,
Yes,
we're joined in the cafe by Liana Miocho, who is an artist who does photography and videography. And welcome, Liana.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We're delighted to have you. So our first question to our guests is, where in the world are you? What took you there and keeps you there? And what state do you vote out of?
Okay, hi. I'm in Rome, Italy. I actually was born in Rome, Italy. My mom was Roman and my dad Italian-American. And I grew up in New York, which is where I vote. Uh-huh. And I always had this dream one day of coming to live in Rome, my other citizenship. And now I go back and forth between Rome and New York, but Rome is my base.
Wow, lovely. So, yes, I want to know your family story, but also your Democrats Abroad journey. So maybe we'll start with the second. At what point did you connect with Democrats Abroad, and what roles have you played for the organization?
I've always voted from abroad, and thanks to Democrats Abroad, that it was very easy to do that using a vote from abroad and with the outreach that they do here in Rome and in Italy. But it wasn't until this second Trump administration that I decided to get involved as a volunteer in a stronger way, in a more visible way. And I am now in charge of Democrats Abroad Italy's Instagram. I help help make also photographs and video content for the global video team as well. So I have two roles there, and it's been great to be able to use my photography and videography to create content for both Italy and for global communications. And I feel that, for my history of my work, which is storytelling through my photography and my videography, that this was a great match, because my photography has always been connected to current events and working, with themes that are important to me, which include specifically migration and memory and identity, which are big topics right now also in the political sphere.
Absolutely.
To say you've always voted abroad, I mean, that's a pretty strong statement. Do you remember the first time you voted?
Well, I've lived in 3 cities, right? I lived in New York City. I lived in Montreal when I went to McGill University, and I've lived in Rome. So I didn't move here until, I've been here now since 2002. Mm-hmm. And so I really had never voted abroad until then. Mm-hmm. But every year since 2002, I voted abroad.
And what was it in 2002 that made you go, I want to do this?
Well, I had been living in the States, so I had never needed to vote from abroad until I got here. Yeah. And that's when I realized that was something that, Democrats abroad made easy to do because they reached out to, I teach at Temple and Cornell University's Rome Abroad programs. And they are also very good at helping to get the vote out for students abroad and for Americans abroad. So that's how I got to know Democrats abroad. But it really wasn't until like I said, until this second administration that I felt motivated to actually volunteer in a grander way.
Right. It's interesting that you connected through the schools, because global Democrats abroad at the global level there's a sort of a standing request for all members to reach out to their alma maters if they went to school in the States, to offer information about votefromabroad.org to their students, to their student abroad programs. And most members don't even know that's a standing request. There's even a template letter that's, available to anybody to use. So it's nice to know that something found you within the school context.
Yes. It was very, very, very well organized, helping to do that. So it was something that I appreciated, existed.
Wonderful.
And tell us about the organization in Rome with the Democrats abroad. How big of a group is it? Italy has 3 chapters of Democrats abroad. There's a northern chapter, which, includes Milan and Venice and, many of the northern cities. And then there's a central chapter, which is, Bologna and many of the cities in the middle. And then we are the southern chapter, which is Rome and everything south of Rome. So that's the chapter that I am involved in. But really, I'm helping all of Italy because, especially with the recent October 18th events, we had Democrats abroad, no tyrants, because it was a Democrats abroad event. Right. Connected with the global movement of No Kings. So we had 3 Democrats abroad, no tyrants, which were Rome, Milan, and Venice. And then we had and Bologna. And we also had an indivisible event in Florence, which is Good Trouble. Firenze. Yes, which is great. Another great name. So it was nice because, we had different groups participating, but we were all united in the same protest.
Right. Wow. So you mentioned using that your work looks at the themes of migration, identity, and what was the third one? I'm sorry, I've forgotten.
And memory.
and memory. So can you talk a little bit about how you address those themes with your art?
Yes. Well, I've had really since my first very big solo show was in 1997 at the Ellis Island Immigration Museum. And the photographs were black and white images that I had taken in Sicily, in Limina, which is a small town near Taormina in Sicily, where my paternal grandparents are from. They immigrated from Sicily, from Limina, Sicily to Ellis Island, and that's where my father was born, and my grandmother was actually pregnant with my aunt on the journey.
Wow.
And it was something, that they were obviously in, what they called steerage, and she would talk about that trip as being very, obviously very, very intense and dramatic. And so I was, in a sense, closer to my mom's Roman. She was born and grew up here. So she met my dad when he was traveling here in Rome, and then they got married here and moved to New York. Or he was from New York, but she moved with him. So in a way, I was much closer to my Roman side because we would come here in the summers, and all of my mom's family was here. But I was curious about the Sicilian side. Most of them had immigrated. Most of them had immigrated because my grandmother and grandfather came in the 1900s, early 1900s, 1920 was when she came. So I was curious to go back to this town, right, and get to know more of my other side of the family, and that's where I met my great uncle, which is my father's uncle, and his story was really interesting because even though he was in a way the one who started the exhibition concept. It didn't start out as an exhibition. It just started out with my curiosity to go back to this town and connect and understand more of my background and my roots on my father's side. Mm-hmm. Right. And my great uncle, he had stayed behind. He did not immigrate like my grandmother did. And so I was curious to, talk to him and to understand more about the town and my family that had remained. Mm-hmm. And even though, he had nothing higher than a third grade education, I still think of him as one of the most worldly persons I had ever met. He said something that was very, I guess, what's the word? It was very insightful. He said that he didn't agree with, a lot of what was happening in the U.S. at that time. He said, Martin Luther King, had been killed. He was talking about the politics that he was upset about or that he didn't agree with. But he said something interesting. He said, but make no mistake, your father would never have become a lawyer if he had stayed in Italy. And I really respect that that's what happened. My grandparents, my grandfather was a manual laborer and my grandmother was a seamstress. And really it was thanks to, the opportunities that they got and growing up in the Bronx in New York. And then my father, put himself through law school and then became a partner in his
The American dream actually works.
It actually worked. And that's, why I decided to kind of illustrate the story through these black and white photographs that kind of went back and forth between New York and Limina, this small town. And it wasn't because I think that my family was so interesting. Like the idea was really to illustrate the story of many people, right, who had that same experience. And so that was an exhibit that I was happy went traveled, around the U.S. and then also to Italy. And it's also, part of some of the themes that I'm working on right now, because, I mean, for me, this idea that, coming from immigrant, grandparents, it really, rips me apart to see what's happening now in the U.S. to immigrants who are like my grandparents. But the difference is, the immigration policies back then were to acknowledge that the U.S. does need immigrants. And now we're just using, illegal labor that we desperately need, but we're not giving people rights. It's a fact, and also in Europe, it's a fact that we need immigration. We need immigration in order for the economies to work. So I think the countries that are acknowledging that are doing better, right? Even Spain is more acknowledging of that and helps immigrants, whereas in Italy, it's an unfair policy as well, because you can be born here and your parents are legal and working here, but a child born here cannot become a citizen until they're 18.
Oh, right. They just changed those laws, didn't they? Yeah.
Right. So, that's always been the case, unfortunately. But now, it's for me, living as a dual citizen and voting in both countries, I'm frustrated on many levels, because I feel that, there's not an acknowledgement on how important that is. So, it's always been something that's been a theme of mine, because I'm outraged right now at what is happening with the attitude towards immigrants. And let's face it, my grandparents were privileged immigrants, just the fact that they were white. It was much easier to be able to, in terms of profiling or being able to assimilate, it was easier, right? And it became, it's obviously harder and which I acknowledge is a lot more difficult. But let's face it, that the U.S. has also been built on, all of us are immigrants, right? Unless you're Native American, nobody's not an immigrant in the U.S. But especially now, the racial profiling is very upsetting.
Absolutely. And just backtracking a little to your family story, your grandparents, did they come specifically for the opportunity, or were they leaving something as well?
Yeah, they were okay. So the Sicily and the South was devastated in terms of poverty in that period, in the early 1900s and 1920s, exactly when they came. So they came specifically for opportunity, and which they were able to find, although ironically they came and then a depression hit, so it was really difficult.
Such timing.
This illusion of the streets are paved with gold, and the immigrants were told, it was really an awful shock, and it was very, very, very difficult. But, my great uncle, I was fascinated, because also he was a farmer, the one who decided to not immigrate, right? So he was a farmer, and what was very common in the South at that time was politically, because the Italy had a little bit, abandoned the South, and a lot of people blame the Italian government for the mass immigration of losing their people, because they didn't help the South or give any opportunities, and they were essentially cut off from the rest of Italy. So the laborers and farmers had very little rights and recognition. So he was part of the Communist Party, which was, in a sense, almost like a social party, not really the same type of communism, that we think of when we think of autocratic, communism in Russia. And I remember him, just like I said, just being very impressed with the U.S. and the fact that my father, would be able to rise that way. But what was interesting, was his love for his sister and how much he missed her, and he wanted to visit her, and he went to go visit her, and he was stopped at the airport because of McCarthyism. And it was really tragic because he then never ended up going again after that. And to me, this idea of thinking that a simple farmer from southern Italy could be a risk to national security is really a joke. And it makes you think about what's happening now in the U.S. in terms of, this new movement to go against anybody who is not, who is in a sense, quote unquote, anti-American, which is what the October 18th protesters were called by Speaker Johnson.
Absolutely.
So we're kind of all over the place with okay.
I know.
Yeah.
So we've got a challenge in an audio medium to talk about a visual medium. I'm just curious if there's some way that you can describe to us how you use photography to illustrate these things.
Yeah, so for me, photography is about storytelling, and I think that I've always been, I've had little interest, let's say in fashion photography, but more my roots are documentary photography, right? So I started out as a photojournalist in New York City, and I worked for the New York Times, freelanced also for New York Newsday and various magazines and newspapers. And for me, the way to be able to really tell stories is through the power of images. I mean, if you think about it, the images have changed the course of politics over the years. I mean, as a professor, I talk to my students about how Vietnam was the first war that we learned the power of photography, which basically through the photographs that we saw, it changed the course of action of the United States politics to pull out of Vietnam once people saw, how unfortunately the civilians and village people were being also targeted, and that the U.S. soldiers were dying for a reason that didn't make sense. And we talk about how important that is, and for me, that in a way that the photographs even that I'm taking today, which concentrate on personal stories, to be able to explain a more universal story. So, so the immigrant story through my family story, or this project that I'm working on on women. Unfortunately, there's a high rate of femicide in Italy. And I've been working with using my photography, but not in a way that is maybe as literal, but maybe in a more abstract way, to be able to feature photographs of these torn ads of women on the walls of Rome, and juxtaposing them with ancient Roman women that were strong figures, both in politics and also in mythology with these Roman goddesses. So I like the idea of, and then photographing statues of women's statues, and then juxtaposing the two in my images is something that I've been recently working on. So cool. It's been, and video has also been another powerful way to kind of use my images to tell a story. I recently did videography project on a market in Rome, a historic market that was being torn down. And I did almost like video portraits of the vendors who, were in their markets that was going to be, soon taken away. And for me, these are the real heroes. Like I've never been in, I've taken photographs of, celebrities and personalities. And it's been interesting to do that in my work. As I'm lucky as a photojournalist, you also get access to a lot of great opportunities like that. But for me, I've always been interested in the quote unquote everyday person. So. Mm-hmm. Photographing the vendors, to me, these small artisans are, the real heroes of, what I believe in terms of small businesses and using their markets or what they create, even if it's how they set up their fruit stand is art too, and photographing that and videoing something that I felt that I could use with my photographs and videos.
Wonderful.
And we're at a point in human history where we're taking more pictures of ourselves than ever before. The technology is just makes it so simple to do. How do you feel about the sheer volume of photos we're taking right now?
Yeah, no, I think to me that is powerful because we, if you think about it, you would be able to only make a film or create if you had a big budget, if you had very expensive cameras, if you could only be able to really have the privilege to make a film, to say what you wanted, or even a documentary. Yeah. And now, I mean, this is something I tell my students too. It's become much more democratic, right? Now, you can tell your story and you can put it together and you can put it on YouTube, and then you could get funding for that project in a way that you would never be able to do in the past. So right. For me, it's exciting. I think that what is the governor of Chicago, what is he saying? He's saying film, take photographs, because it's right. our power. It's our tool to be able to document and show abuses and show how we are able to tell our story. Right. I mean, from a photographic perspective, I tell my students as well, you want to be able to find a way. So let's say how many pictures have been taken of the Coliseum? Let's say when we go out to take pictures, I said, right. So you have to, I always say, take the postcard picture, have it as part of your library, but then your job is to go beyond that and to find a photograph that's yours, that only you can take, right? Whatever that may be, the angle that you took, the person that happened to be, in that photograph at that moment. There's still a photography that is only yours, and that's what I push them to do, because I think that we have that capability, and frankly, I'm really glad that it's become more democratic and more people have access to it.
Well, thank you for that advice, because there's it's okay to take the same photo that everybody else has taken, but exactly. What frustrates me endlessly is if I'm at a concert and somebody has their phone out and is recording 3, 4, 5 songs, and you just know that's going to be a crappy recording that nobody is ever going to watch again. So
right.
there's
I try to say, try to put down your camera and try not to. I actually, since I started out as a black and white analog, film photographer, that was my first love, spending hours in a dark room. looking for a print to appear, in the chemicals. And anyway, and now, I still shoot analog film, but I'm obviously also shooting digital. But if you think about back to film, where you had 36 images on one roll of film. Everyone had to count, yeah. Right. So every shot has to count. So one of the assignments I give my students is to limit yourself to 20 steps, 20 photographs, and you have to only take that many. And one of the problems with digital photography is that we take 100 pictures to get one good one. Yep. And I say to them, pretend that you have a film roll and you only have this 36 roll pictures, and it's for the whole day or the whole week, even what it used to be, right? And then I think that just gives you more discipline. And sure. It's a little bit sad when. But is that what? Because I was kind of wondering just about what you think of the psychology of people who stand there and record and document every single thing and then never ever watch it again. Like, what? There's something human about wanting to have your own memory of it. Or is it just being a jerk and wanting to stand in the middle of everything and be the center of attention because you're recording something? Right. So unfortunately, I think we because these phones, become almost like part of our bodies, like they're in our hands, so they're very easy to, they're in our pockets. I think there is the risk that you're not experiencing what you're looking at anymore, and you're just worried about kind of telling your stories to others rather than being present in the moment yourself. And I think that's something that, is making people distance themselves from what they're actually looking at.
And yet you're both making me think about the fact, David's original question on this that started this train of conversation about how many of us have thousands and thousands of photographs and videos on our phones we will never look at again. But most of us are not writing diaries, which used to be something everybody did. Yep. So for the anthropologists who come later, they're not going to have lots of written record. But if they have access to our phones, I suppose, it'll stand in for that record of daily life.
Yes, exactly. And actually, that's interesting that you said that, because the recent solo exhibition that I had in Rome, I was very excited because it was at the Gallery of Modern Art in Rome, and the title was Visual Diary. And it was a collaboration with my photographs and videos, and Jhumpa Lahiri, the Pulitzer Prize winning author, who her whole life, had written up until she moved to Italy in English, and now she started writing in Italian, and her recent books have been in Italian. So we collaborated with this idea of photographs and words coming together as a visual diary, and it's something that was really interesting for me to work to collaborate, with another artist, or in this case with a writer, and it's something that it was photographing, kind of the rhythms and the daily life in Italy, and both through still photographs and videos and her text. So I think that we do have visual diaries now more than written diaries. Not everybody wrote a diary, but I would say 99% of the people, under a certain age are creating visual diaries with their phones.
Right. Fascinating. So, art for activism.
Yes.
Let's talk about using art for activism. That goes back.
Inflatable frogs, is that what you mean?
Well, yeah, that's
Yeah, and I mean, my inspiration is Nan Goldin. I mean, Nan Goldin, is an important photographer, who became famous with her images in the 70s when the, Museum of Modern Art bought her images of her friends in downtown New York City and Chelsea, and they were very intimate portraits, but also very, very political. Many of her friends, were gay and trans, as was she. And it was the AIDS crisis. And, her photographs were very powerful. And, she showed with intimacy her images also, of friends dying. And she recently created a whole campaign against the Sackler family because of being responsible for the opioid crisis. And she went to all of the major museums, protested. There's a documentary of her work, and she got the Louvre, the Met, to take down the Sackler name from the major museums in the world.
Wow.
Because, they, as we know, they provided a drug that they knew was addictive and easy to access, and is responsible for, for much of, the decay of many of our cities, and has created homeless and addicted persons from everyday people who became addicted. So I just think that your work can also be political, and that's okay. Some people would say, oh, you shouldn't be political in your art, but for me, it's one and the same. Like, it's
yeah. How are you not political in art?
Yeah.
Art always is.
I think that we're in a climate that people are scared. And to be honest, and this might be radical to hear on both sides, but I think that there's an extremism both on the left and the right, yeah, that sometimes comes together and becomes so left that you become right, or so right that you become left. So
right.
In a sense, I think that we have to be able to be a little bit more open in terms of our expression.
Sure,
and it's difficult to do when we have all of these rules in art and in the universities, and what we can and can't say.
But isn't art, by pure definition of art, something that moves you, that motivates you, that makes you feel something?
Exactly. I agree. I mean, I think that's why, you may not, your art may not be political, but whatever you're saying is an expression that is a successful piece of art is going to be appreciated universally, right? It's not going to be just a personal expression of the artist. It's something that should touch a chord. Exactly.
Yes,
that's acceptable. Right. It is entirely acceptable.
And that's okay. And that's what happens in my critiques. I say, if you hate this photograph that we're discussing, I want to hear it. I want to hear why, because to me, that's interesting too. I don't want to hear, I like this photograph, I don't like this photograph. I want to hear the why.
Oh, right? I have posted things to annoy people. I mean, that is the design of it.
Exactly.
So how do we answer the people who say, oh, it's just a frill, and they want to cut funds for supporting it in schools? And
that's to me is sad, because if we start losing and it is happening at universities and as humanity courses or art courses, I think we are also cutting off a form of expression that is part of what we have as living in a democratic country is to be able to express ourselves. All students should be exposed to it, art history, and it's another type of history that helps you understand the current moment. I think, in a way, sometimes being in Rome and being surrounded by all of this history, right?
Mm-hmm.
It helps to ground you. It helps to understand. Just by turning around, I feel privileged being able to be surrounded by history. And Rome is wonderful because it's ancient Rome, but it's also Renaissance, Baroque. We have all these layers, right?
Right, and modern.
and then contemporary, which is a challenge sometimes architecturally to be able to integrate. But I think that maybe part of, in a way, the U.S., we're young. We're a very young country, right?
Incredibly,
so,
yes. And Canada too.
Yeah, even younger.
Canada too, and I think that in a way, sometimes, we act like teenagers, like we don't have the sense of like history, right? And I think that it's important for us to understand history, to be able to understand the current moment. So it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. This idea of how recent living here, that my maternal grandfather was a prisoner of war in Nazi Germany. That's only my grandfather. It's not so distant that we had fascism in Italy or Nazism. It's so recent. So therefore, to feel it, to actually, be able to see, the effects of it, and in a recent history is very daunting. And so that's something that I think, makes me think of the connections now with what's happening in the U.S. and how, we have to be really careful about autocracy taking over.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Dare I ask you, somebody so well versed in visual language and a professor of the medium, 2 letters, AI.
Oh, yes. So that, it's very interesting because I have some issues with how AI, like everything else, is unfortunately, I feel for some content creators, some video content creators now that AI is making videos. I mean, Cuomo was criticized for using an AI video showing him on a subway in New York when he wasn't really on the subway.
Oh, I didn't hear that one.
And I think it's like anything else, like as with photojournalism, when you're telling a real story, you have to say when you're using something that's fake, when you're photoshopping, when you're, we have to be very careful, to be able to have, I think, regulation that shows that something is made by AI. In all newspapers, in all magazines, in all media, you must say when you have digitally manipulated a photograph. And I think that needs to be the same with AI. Otherwise, it's very dangerous because then we're not telling the real stories anymore.
But there's something ancient about this too. Did man really walk on the moon, or was all that faked?
Right. Yeah. A lot of people, say that. Well, that's the thing about, photography too. Like people say, oh, if you have a picture of it, then it's real. But even that, like you can have many people taking the same incident and everybody will have their own, version of it. So it's not as objective as we think, right? It could be subjective as well.
Right.
But thank God for photography because there's people like, who have said, the Holocaust didn't happen. And if we didn't have images, we wouldn't be able to say, yes, it did happen because people can read as much as they want, but they won't believe it many times until they see a picture. So it is something that, is powerful.
Right. Well, Liana, this has been so interesting. Thank you so much for sharing all these thoughts.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Is there anything that you didn't get a chance to say that you'd like to add?
I would like to end by thanking my mother, Giuliana Mamukari. She was a professor of Italian literature. She was a poet. She was a painter. She was a writer, and she was an activist. And she was called by friends a force of nature, forza di natura. She inspired my activism. She was both active as a dual citizen in Italy and the U.S. To protest always for human rights. I would like to read one of her poems that is titled Without Borders, Senza Barriere in Italian. And I think it's very relevant for today's times because borders are artificial and deny the fact that we are all connected as human beings. Without borders. On marble warm with history, I reveal to the inevitable stars this story of a foreign land. Souls longing forever to find each other as skyscrapers loom in my mind. The ruins that made me know my Mediterranean heart, the shadows that disquiet me away from here. Give me your hand. The Caesars are near, ancient like us, without borders. In this silence, so weighed with history upon grass that remembers, we are free. Senza barriere. Sui marmi caldi di storia, alle stelle di sempre, svelo questa storia di terra straniera, anime anellanti da sempre di trovarsi, mentre grattacieli vagano nella mente. I ruderi che mi hanno fatto sanno la mia tenerezza mediterranea, le ombre che mi inquietano lontano da qui. I Cesari sono vicini, antichi, come noi, senza barriere. In questo silenzio denso di tempo, tra le erbe che ricordano, siamo liberi. Thank you for having me.
If you live outside the U.S., please register with your voting state at votefromabroad.org every year. Do it now. To find all our episodes, go to democratsabroad.org and look for us in the drop-down menus. I'm Rachel Oikster with David Schellenberg in Ottawa, Canada. Thank you for listening to Democrats Abroad, the Blue Vote Cafe.